Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Malta Business Network, welcome to today's webinar titled Rethinking Our Tourism Strategy. Today's webinar will be moderated by Mr. Rafael Aloisio, Financial Advisory Leader at Deloitte Malta, and our distinguished panel consisting of Tony Zara from the MHRA, Leslie Vella, Chief Strategist at the Malta Tourism Authority, and Simon Naudi, CEO of International Hotels and Investments. Sadly, the Honourable Minister Clayton Bartolo, Tourism Minister, will not be able to join us this afternoon due to unforeseen circumstances. However, he has kindly sent us a video message which I shall now be sharing.
Distinguished guests and colleagues, in this age of acceleration, the tourism world is changing every day. The movement of persons from one destination to another entails various demands that may be different and even more complex when compared to the global scenario we had just a few months ago. Certainly, hospitality and the quality of service a country offers is not solely a consideration, but a necessity. As our tourist inflows feature increased quantities of different nationalities and age groups spread more evenly throughout the year, we are witnessing some very interesting dynamics, which imply good news. Being effective on quality as individuals and organizations is no longer an optional in today's world. Actually, it's the price of entry in an ever-changing playing field. Surviving, thriving, innovating, excelling, and leading the way in this new reality will require us to build on and reach beyond effectiveness. Quality is not about adding one more component to the industry and forgetting traditional roots. It is about seeing and harnessing the power of a second dimension of a diversified tourism sector. Through this, we have quality products, services, sustainability, social and environmental awareness, visitor satisfaction, host population support, improved economic returns, and a more effective and attractive employer for motivated professionals. All this is meant to revitalize the industry so as to future-proof it in a way which ensures that it continues to contribute to Malta's socio-economic development as an advanced European economy. The Malta Tourism Strategy for 2021 up until 2030 is derived from this mindset and based on three fundamental pillars: recover, rethink, revitalize. Despite this long-term vision, we have also invested in a €20 million recovery program aimed at kickstarting tourism by continuing to support our people. We've established airline connectivity and relaunched in our source markets as they continue to reopen. Most of all, we are undertaking a rethinking process of where we want tourism to go, so that it strongly embraces these principles all under one umbrella, that of quality. In the recovery stage, a balance should be kept between volumes needed to keep operations feasible and revenues to make them sustainable. Moreover, the strategy to move towards higher quality visitors is a medium to long-term transformation. It will not happen overnight, and it must be built on sustainable foundations. This is not just a question of changing one's marketing strategy or targeting a higher spending demographic. It requires a holistic approach that takes into account the current product, the needs and wants of the clientele one wishes to attract, and gradually move towards the desired levels of quality in all aspects. This will take time, but we are already seeing improvements in some areas. Quality has to be a goal across the board. We must have quality in all hotel-star properties, holiday flats, farmhouses and villas, tours and attractions. We need to take stock of what we did in the past years and rebuild stronger foundations to make it more sustainable in the years to come. The government will be playing its role as well. Malta's successful story in the hospital industry cannot stop here. We need to mirror ourselves as courageous, innovative and forward-looking industry that does not shy away from change. I am optimistic that when this pandemic is a chapter of the past, Malta will be much stronger than it was a few months ago. This profound mentality shall be the founding basis of our vision of making Malta a home of tourism excellence for the years to come. Together, let's make it happen. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you to the panelists who are joining us this afternoon, and I'm sure will give us an interesting insight to a number of the situation with the local tourism industry is going through. Following up on the minister's sort of message, which obviously talks about the recovery, talks about looking forward, and obviously talking about the recovery and the thriving period. However, although in many respects maybe the worst is over, the reality of the scenario is that the global anxiety levels regarding COVID are still fairly high, although they are coming down, with latest surveys showing globally that 50% of people surveyed are still rather anxious about the health condition, health risks. 40% of people surveyed, only 40% of people surveyed are actually feeling safe to travel. It's improved from what it was, but it's still a far way off from where would like it to be. The older generation, only 30% of people are feeling safe to travel. August, which typically is sort of our strongest month, was 65% below 2019. The World Travel Organization is predicting that the next 4 or 5 months will see are expecting a steady growth, and hopefully they're looking at the 65%, coming down to 40%. However, I think what we all hoped would be a fairly short, let's call it blow, is now becoming increasingly clear that full recovery is actually not going to be something of 2021, neither of 2022. And most international stakeholders are now looking at a full recovery to 2019 levels would be closer to 2023 and 2024. Obviously, we always hope that with the correct measures in the short term, possibly Malta might be able to improve at a pace which may be faster than the international trends. There are some signs that in certain months, if the connectivity is in place and the overall health and measures taken are appropriate, there is a tendency to rebound. And there are a few success stories where maybe some of the operators are actually doing better than the norm. I think what we can do is turn to Leslie, and against this backdrop, obviously looking at the past, the present, and the optimism for the future. I think obviously there are a lot of lessons learned from what's happened since COVID. And I think obviously from these lessons, I think our ability to thrive would depend on what measures we're going to take to rebound quicker. And I think inevitably what lessons and what changes we need to do to the local tourism strategy, which I think beyond 2021 will definitely be different and it will not be the same that we were looking at in 2019. Leslie, maybe we could start with your comments about and your perspective, obviously. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rafel, and welcome to all, and thank you for having me here. You raised some very interesting points with which I agree. So basically, in 2020, we started off with a very difficult situation after 3 months of record growth, which was the pandemic, which everybody was hoping will go away by 2021. I think today there is this widespread agreement and understanding that this is going to be a medium term, at least, situation to which we must adapt. As you say, the foremost priority at the moment is recovery, because obviously the industry, the sector, the whole economy, not only in Malta but all over the world, economies are suffering because of the cutbacks, because of the shrinkages brought about by COVID. So recovery is a very important element of all the work that we seek to do. However, COVID coincided with the drafting of our strategy to 2030, so obviously had to be integrated with the medium to longer term measures which the minister amplified upon very clearly in his introduction in terms of where we want our tourism to go up to 2030. So I think we have these two parallel interrelated parts which we need to look at. There is the recovery, which needs to identify which are the best serving, which are the fastest reacting, which present us with the best opportunities. And hopefully, as we go along this evening, I'll be able to give some numbers from some studies which we have obtained. So the recovery is all about us being fast and capitalizing on opportunities which exist by understanding the market, while at the same time undertaking the surgery necessary through strategic development and strategic planning in order to make our tourism industry more future-proof to face the challenges of the future. And these challenges include climate change, they include a more discerning type of customer in a highly competitive world, they include the need for the delivery of a higher quality, and in a destination like ours, with its challenges brought about by a small surface area and the high population density, a type of tourism which applies more rigidly principles of sustainability. So I think I'll stop here at this point.
Rafel, you are on mute.
Sorry, Peter. Get used to this. Simon, sort of being in the hot seat, must be quite a challenging period. But then obviously, your perspective on the same issues.
Thank you, Rafel, and thank you to everybody else. Well, in terms of the question about a timetable on recovery, let's start with that. First of all, we take a very optimistic and bullish approach, right? And we see this not so much only through the lens of Malta, but as you all know, our company is involved in hotels in several countries across Europe, so we can see sort of the same picture from different angles. Wherever there are no restrictions to travel from large markets, for example, London from within the United Kingdom, or our hotel in St. Petersburg from within Russia, where there are no restrictions. You can get in a car, on a train, and a plane and fly through the city where we have a hotel. It is evident that people will get on a plane, will travel, will stay in hotels, and there is a huge demand for this. So our hotels, and again, repeat to use these two examples, London and St. Petersburg, have had a very good summer since restrictions were over. So the corollary of that is when restrictions to travel within Europe, which is unfortunately considered as many countries rather than one space from the point of view of pandemic, are removed or are made easier, like the use of certificates, PLF locators online, then people will get on a plane and travel. And we have seen this in Malta ourselves. So we have 5 hotels in Malta. We've had a relatively very good August, a very good September, and we're pretty optimistic about October, November. Beyond a forecast of even 2 months, in today's world, even pre-COVID, is very hard to predict. People do not book holidays or even business trips 6 months in advance. That's something from a past era. So at the current pace, we're pretty optimistic. Of course, it will not be a recovery in next year to the levels of 19. Also because in Malta, we depend a lot on conference tourism, or let's say there is a significant percentage, maybe especially in the 4- and 5-star market, which depends on conferences, which are the only piece of the business that really is booked perhaps a year in advance. Maybe not by the delegates, but by the organizers. So on that basis, it would be very hard for anybody to argue that 22 will be as good as 19, far from it. But 23, and I think this picture, for all various different reasons, is the same picture we see, not just ourselves, but of course we know people in the industry. We are ourselves shareholders in the Global Hotel Alliance, where we sit alongside 5 other global brands, and between us we have a global presence. So we hear what's going on in China and America and Africa and South America. So by and large, everybody seems to be pointing including of financial institutions, are taking the view that we should be out of the woods to some extent by 2023. So that's, in summary, our view on timing of the recovery. You also, and it was very encouraging to hear the minister's intervention, because the focus, as he rightly put it, for Malta now shifts to the product. So we've had an earthquake in our industry. We had reached what we as Corinthia, and many of you know my chairman, and he's been saying this for many years, we had reached a point where there are perhaps too many people coming to Malta, or the industry was overburdened by demand. And therefore, isn't it time to shift to a focus on quality, not at the expense perhaps of, certainly not at the expense of expenditure in Malta. And I would also add, also not at the expense of numbers. I mean, the higher room rates we charge as hotels, or the more expensive Malta becomes as a destination, the length of stay of holidays in our country will be shorter. So in reality, we will need perhaps more physical numbers, and that's good news for the airport, for the airlines, because they can sell tickets. But it's also good news for Malta, because we will have not as many physical bodies in the same place at the same time. So that's sort of an argument one can make. But no doubt, this is a tremendous opportunity, which we wholeheartedly support, to focus on quality. We have so many attractions in our country, so many reasons why people would want to come here, not just for business, but also for pleasure, that it's high time we take stock and build on what we have. Thank you.
Tony, I think that I think in many respects, I think a lot of your thoughts sort of run quite in sync with some of the points raised by Simon, but obviously having your perspective, which obviously has a lot of a broad-based flow through to you. Possibly you can share us your perspective.
Well, let's talk about the recovery first. I think 23 at the moment looks it's a reasonable target to look at, and possibly we might not be all the way to the 19 figures, but certainly we should be approaching those figures if we want to go down that route. That is the important thing. And of course, as the minister said, there is a strategy in the works, a 2030 strategy at this moment in time. The strategy has not been revealed to the industry, so we are looking forward to identifying what the strategy says. I hope it does take into consideration that there is a serious EU push towards environmental consideration, climate change, sustainability. So this new direction has to take into consideration these effects. I was hearing Simon talking about possibly shorter stays because the price of accommodation might go up. I'm not sure that I would agree with that assumption. I think due to the fact that there might be increases in the cost of travel, the possibility that there would be an extension of the duration of the stay would be much higher, given that the price of getting to and from the country would rise, given the situation on climate change and the possible tax that there will be imposed on airlines due to CO2 emissions. So in conclusion to what I'm saying is, yes, in the short term, I would tend to agree with Simon that 23 looks like a period when we could recover. And let's not forget that the COVID hit us in 19. That is a full 4 years from when COVID started. You know, we're all talking about a 3-month emergency situation when this hit us. We're no longer talking about 3 months now. We're talking about a much longer period, and the country has to take into consideration sustainability, and sustainability has to take into consideration such things as the size of the country and the carrying capacity. As MHRA, we are at this moment in time conducting a study on the carrying capacity of the country, which should be available towards the first quarter of next year. This will give us an indication of where we should be heading in terms of ability to sustain the industry with a carrying capacity with the carrying capacity report. The situation is not going to be easy. You know, what we had in the past was a development over the years of a similar type of arrangement that has changed very little over 30 years, then changed due to the distribution network. But all of a sudden, the change is now no longer a technology one or a change in distribution. The change now is being brought on by health and by climate. And those are very, very, very big changes. How we're going to handle these is going to be the big question that we're going to have to address sooner rather than later. Thank you very much. Rayfield, up to you.
Yeah, I think coming across from the minister's sort of intervention, and also from what all three panelists have spoken about, clearly there's a general feeling that 2023 is a reasonable target date for Malta to be looking at, hopefully getting to recovery. It would also say that there is a clear direction coming out that the industry should be looking at quality, maybe summing that up in maybe doing better with less. And I would like to say that in other industries and other sectors which I have exposure to, which possibly had started, which were hit by the sector, by the crisis as well. I've seen a number of success stories where a number of operators have used the realities and the lessons learned to actually improve their business models, and actually have had some positive results at significantly lower volumes. So possibly, I think in our strategy moving forward, I think these realities and these experiences could come into the longer term strategy. However, what I'd like to sort of, in this round, possibly look at the next 24 months. We do know that, I do feel in many respects that we've got world champion boxers, let's say, who are epitomized in our hoteliers, who have in all respects, in many respects, for the last decades, been a pillar for the local economy. Obviously when things gets a bit tougher, we sometimes the negatives come out, but clearly tourism has and must remain an important part of our national economy. We have been 18 months, in a very negative sort of financial position. We do know that it's evident that we will take another 18 months, let's put it this way, as an indicator to sort of get back to levels which are more sustainable. So obviously, the war, we've survived the battle, but we've got a number still to go ahead. What I'd like to ask the panelists in the next 18 months, there are measures which need to be taken to, one, start improving the prospects that the recovery will be better, will be more accelerated, than maybe we can sort of be ahead of the curve in the recovery. So over there, I think there are some messages which I think you could put on the agenda, for Leslie and the other people to make sure that we do. I could mention that obviously from the financial side, we do know that when moratoria were set for the by banks, obviously everybody was anticipating an 18-month, a 12-month cycle. That has clearly not happened. If we don't start taking sort of these factors into consideration, obviously there will be additional challenges. So we need to sort of look at the financing. But I think if I could ask the panelists to possibly, with their insight, to sort of what are the points that they think the authorities and the industry players should be taking on board in the next 18 months, which hopefully will be improving, but I think will still be fairly challenging. Again, maybe Leslie, we could start with you and go around again.
Okay, thank you, Rafel. There's a number of aspects which need to be addressed to respond to the interesting points you raised. I think primarily, while we are agreeing about the 18-month period of recovery, I think we have to bear in mind that the recovery that I trust that all of us are looking at is a recovery within an upwardly moving curve. So we shall not be underwater for the next 18 months at the same level of depth, but gradually improving. And although one can drown in 1 centimeter of water as much as one can drown in under a kilometer of water, but I think in business terms, having an upward slope is something which gives courage and which minimizes losses and that sort of thing. So I think this is the first important thing. Secondly, I think one of the things that we should constantly keep in mind when it comes to the recovery is to avoid things that happen to us and to others in the first few months of the pandemic, is to avoid stops and starts and this sort of thing, because that is what causes greatest damage in terms of consumer confidence. It causes a lot of damage in terms of our relationship with our suppliers, such as the airlines, for instance, which get confused. They need a more stable outlook in order to be able to plan their growth in connectivity to the destination. The importance of keeping a clean health sheet in terms of managing the pandemic through high vaccination rates, high booster shots, and keeping hospitalizations and mortalities low, I think is a very important parameter, because the research that all of us see from time to time from various sources indicates that people seek places where risks are lowest. It changes with age group. The older you are, the more you will tend to go for a staycation and holiday at home or close to home. The younger you are, you take a bit more risks, but ultimately the security brought about by a better or a reduced risk health situation in the destination will help. Obviously, you raised the point about moratoria, you raised the point about companies continuing to operate under difficult circumstances for up to another 18 months. I am sure that while government has extended a very important set of measures over the past 1.5 years, I am sure that in the budget, common sense dictates that there will be an extension of this sort of support rather than leave the industry in the lurch. And I stress once again, maybe I wasn't clear enough in my first intervention. I think it's also all about being very attentive, being very careful all the time to monitor opportunities which arise in a very rapidly changing situation and capitalize on them. As things stand at this stage, we are operating, let's take the next 6 months ahead of us. We are operating in a situation where a lot of potential travelers, younger travelers, especially in our source markets, are longing for summer holidays, which they have missed twice in a row, 2 years in a row. And although winter is not summer, we do have an excellent European weather record, which we should take to our advantage to promote the destination. Our airline connectivity is concentrated on the 5 markets which have the highest, most likely to travel by plane metrics for the next 6 months: Spain, France, Poland, UK, Italy. So they are markets in which we should concentrate because we shall have the airline capacity. We should focus on the fact of our Mediterranean location and our Mediterranean climate. These are so basically we are looking for a budget. One is hoping for a budget that will continue to extend levels of support so that the industry, we have helped it to hold out so far, will continue to help it to get out of the crisis in the coming months. We are looking at a recovery curve which is upward sloping. We are looking at a situation where we need to capitalize on every opportunity that comes. We have to act fast. And I think as a country, we have, and as a tourism industry, we have a very great tradition of being very fast to react to circumstances, we in Malta, which is why, in spite of our diseconomies of scale and in spite of our small size, we in the past 10 years have managed to overperform European and global trends in tourism. And I'm sure that this resilience and this entrepreneurial spirit of our industry will help us weather the coming difficult months and continue to help us outperform, so that we will be amongst the first to get out of the mess brought about by COVID since March 2020.
Simon, thank you, Leslie. Clearly, some of the trends that you've been seeing, where people, if they can get to their vacation destination, Simon, you said the numbers are looking good. I've had some contacts in Gozo, again, in our own small thing, who actually said their August of this year was the best August in the history. Obviously, a different reality. So I'm not talking about just tourism, inbound tourism. But from your end, Sam, the next 18 months, what are the things that you would like to see the country doing, to try to get, as they put it, that curve coming up as strongly as possible?
Very interesting. And I will answer it not from the perspective, of course, of our company, but of hotels and the government and every stakeholder involved. And to answer it, I would start by saying what we need a little bit of a dose of self-confidence and self-belief in our country. Of course, like everywhere in the world, the population of any country tends to be the most self-critical, and many of us tend to highlight a lot of things which we think need improving in our country. But it's important to start any conversation on strategy by believing in ourselves. We have a fantastic destination. We have a beautiful capital city, lovely water, nice islands, like you mentioned, like Gozo. There's so much to do and see in Malta in a very short space and with good weather year round. So it's not like you have to travel for days on end to see different things. And so the starting point, in my opinion, has to be a positive approach to our industry. I would suggest we focus on 3 areas. The first immediate one is HR. Today we have a huge problem of manning our hotels. It's not just us. And by the way, it's not just Malta. We have huge problems in Russia, in London, in Lisbon, in Hungary, and also in Malta. Why? Because certain categories of labor in our industry worldwide tend to be migrant and casual labor. All of this labor during the pandemic went home. If they were in London, they went back to Eastern Europe. If they were in St. Petersburg, they went back to Tajikistan and Kazakhstan. If they were in Malta, they went back to Italy, to Spain, wherever they came from. So the first immediate task is we ended up in a situation in Malta in August and now in September where we have rooms we cannot sell because we don't have personnel to clean them, enough personnel to clean them. So we had to put limits, much to our dismay, on a number of our hotels of how much we can sell. So we are reaching out as a company, recruiting directly from overseas, but together with the government, we need to be open, flexible, quick in permits and related issues. So that is an immediate issue that needs to be addressed. The second part is value. So one is HR. The second one I would say is value. This summer, I personally have had the good fortune to go on business trips to Greece, Portugal, and Sardinia for various reasons. 3 direct competitors of Malta, right, in the Mediterranean. The room rates that one is paying in Portugal, in Greece, and Sardinia are beyond the imagination of what the hotels in Malta will charge. I mean, literally 5-star hotels, and the same for 4-star, 3-star. We also have the threat of inflation coming. Well, it's not so much a threat, it's a reality of inflation, which we are seeing from a construction perspective overseas. And this is going to be a reality that hits us. So the industry, which is not just the hotels, we need to have the confidence to raise our prices. Somebody at the end of the day has to pay for increased costs, whether it's increased salaries to attract labor to our industry, whether it's increased cost to buy the produce, the food that we serve in our restaurants. It will give us more confidence to increase our prices if we also, and this is where sort of the government has perhaps a bigger role than hotels, focus on the product. I do not think that the product in Malta has any issue, especially insofar as hotels are concerned. The hotels tend to be very well regulated, inspected, checked. We have a very disciplined lobby through the MHRA, through Tony on this call. But the tourism product in Malta is wider than hotels. It's also apartments. More than half the tourists who come to Malta don't stay in hotels. They stay in apartments. The museums, the way we manage our beaches. So if I were to humbly suggest a focus for the next 18 months in Malta, it's precisely on all these touch points. Yes, of course, we're open to any inspection and suggestion on the hotels, but there are many other parts, transport infrastructure, like I said, the beaches, the leisure side of tourism, that could do with a spot of regulation, discipline, standards. And we have to find a way to convince everybody that if we invest a bit more in quality, the industry will actually be more profitable, because we will then charge what people in Portugal are charging, or people in Greece are charging, or people in Italy are charging. So to answer your question, HR, we have to address in the next 18 months, value, as in how do we price ourselves in the market, and what do we give as a product for that cost. Thank you.
Tony.
Thank you, Rayful. Let me start with pricing. What a hotel room actually gets in Malta as in other countries. You remember me, Rayful, well before COVID, explaining that we're heading for overcapacity in the supply of rooms. And we're there. We have overcapacity. And the rules of the game is that when the supply exceeds the demand, then there's one thing that's going to suffer, and that is going to be the price. Unfortunately, that is the situation we have today, where the supply of rooms actually exceeds the demand. If anything, it's my opinion, the fact that we had a number of rooms practically in every hotel which were not being utilized because of staff actually increased the ability to raise the prices, which of course correlates to the fact that supply and demand. So my view is that if we had the HR to fill all those hotel beds, my worry would be that the actual price of the hotel room would have gone down. But Simon probably would be able to tell me more on this subject rather than myself. The next area that I would like to talk about is connectivity. Connectivity is extremely important for Malta, and we've now had our major connector, our national airline, certainly in a situation of very serious health situation, and we must ensure at all costs that the airline will keep flying. It's going to be a very big challenge to achieve this, and I hope that we will be able to achieve this situation. Otherwise, we would really have a difficulty. I agree with Simon that the product needs to be improved, and the product from the point of view of the outside areas, which are public areas rather than the private sector. The private sector, we have seen good improvement overall, and it's certainly an area where we have seen a lot of improvement there. But the public areas are the areas which now need to be looked at. Unfortunately, we are a small country, a tiny country. The impact of the population on this tiny country is immense. One only has to walk around the countryside, and I did that last Sunday, to understand how terrible, how big the impact of the population is on this tiny island. And therefore, it is an even bigger challenge to make sure that we keep this tiny island in a respectable manner. Even our roads get so much punishment from traffic that it is much more difficult to keep much more difficult and expensive to keep in a good state than similar roads in other countries where they don't get the use. So in conclusion, I would say, one, we have to be careful because we have an oversupply of rooms, and I am amazed that I get people still coming to me and saying, you know what I'm going to do, Tony? I'm going to build a hotel. And I think to myself, well, don't we already have overcapacity? Why build a hotel? Only this morning, I was being told by a large hotel, we're building 2 more stories. All right, fine. You're just creating more supply, and how can you increase your room rate? You cannot. That's the reality. So supply of hotel beds is the first item that we have to look at. Connectivity is the second item that we must look at. And the third item is we must take care of the public areas. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, great. We also seem to be on track time-wise as well. And possibly, I think what we could go down is literally a quick round on each speaker, sort of what we call the winding up comments that you might want to make. I think clearly the idea is to send messages to stakeholders. I think it is Simon's comment, sort of raising the morale, putting more self-belief in ourselves. We've done it many times in the past. Clearly a big challenge, but again, maybe the message that's coming across. Maybe let's focus on quality and trying to, even if the volumes might be lower, either because of arrivals or because of the capacity issue, which Tony mentioned. If we do work on rate, we know that if rate goes down, to bring it up again, history has told us it will take 4 or 5 years to get it back to a level that makes sense. I have done a bit of surveys in August, and if we do a bit of comparative analysis, I think, Tony, your comment that the fact that maybe some bed stock wasn't fully available helped support the rate, and it is positive that the difference in rate in August was actually better than the difference in rate in July. So basically, it would seem that there wasn't this massive discounting. What is positive, or maybe what over there, is maybe other countries have taken it to a level where their rates have actually improved. So maybe we can take a lesson from some of the other geographies and the other experiences. But again, maybe one last round. Feel free to make any comments to stakeholders, to obviously authorities, for anything that we feel should be tackled, should be addressed to continue enhancing the prospects of a quicker recovery, but more importantly, a sustainable one. Quick wins to then just fall flat on our face. This is definitely not in anybody's interest, but wins which can be part of our longer term strategy and will help us to sort of sustain them clearly will be welcome. So Leslie, over to you.
Okay. I think to tie the recovery with the strategy, obviously we have to see them as overlapping, and as I said earlier, two parallel, interrelated, interwoven aspects. So basically, whilst we should put a lot of effort on recovery, we shouldn't use the excuse of recovery to accept anything that comes our way, which disturbs or which goes against the longer term strategy, which I think from my taking of what the other panelists have said, I think we are very much in agreement. The impact, or rather the emphasis on the delivery of quality, the emphasis on retaining a volume, a supply which makes sense for the country, which does not dilute our offer and place us at the mercy of lower prices, which in turn then instigates a cycle of price reduction, service quality deterioration, and ultimately bad news for the industry. So the element of quality ties very quickly with the element of looking at supply. And in this respect, I agree with Tony that there might be, if I could be courageous enough to say it, an element of lack of imagination in terms of our investors, in that have money, let's build some more accommodation, or let's extend the accommodation we have, rather than focus on strengthening what we have with a view to having a superior controlled supply product which will sell better and which will not necessitate the huge dilution brought about by volumes. In terms of the long-term strategy, the HR dimension we have mentioned, ultimately we can never forget, and we must never forget, that we are talking about the hospitality industry, and our visitors still place a very high emphasis and a very high value on Maltese hospitality. So the provision of the supply of the availability of adequately trained human resources who are able to give the traditional Maltese hospitality, I think, is also something that we need to keep in mind. Concepts which in many discussions remain hot air up there, such as sustainability, such as climate change, are going to hit us hard in the next few years. They're going to hit us hard in terms of sustainability because of what Tony very clearly described as the huge pressures of humanity on this very tiny territory. There isn't one place that you can go without seeing development. There isn't one place that you can go to without seeing a human presence of some sort. We're everywhere and all over the place, and the territory passes through a lot of pressures. So sustainability is something which will hit us, and we need to address even and embrace as a tourism industry, because eventually it will bite us. It will come back to bite us. This is not something airy-fairy up there. Same with climate change. We are a destination which is relatively low-lying. Most of our tourism infrastructure is on a low-lying, almost at sea level coastline. So sea level rises, storm, sea surges, etc., are bound to have a direct impact, but also extreme heat, also water pressures, etc., will all have impacts which we need to address by making our industry more resilient, and also again tying to a point which Tony raised earlier, the pressures on connectivity, particularly air connectivity for a destination like ours, which is 99% dependent on air to bring its tourists, as air travel becomes targeted at various international levels as something that needs to be taxed and restrained through taxation to compensate for its carbon footprint. So I think to wrap up very quickly, it's the recovery, but not recovery at all costs, but taking these factors, the quality, the HR, the product, and also the supply, and also ultimately the higher levels, which traditionally we looked at nebulously, like sustainability and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Indeed, very reassuring to have people of your competence sort of behind these important things that we need to do. I think it is very good even for the general public to sort of be access to understand these issues, because sometimes we do have a tendency just looking at top line and bottom line and sort of all is good or bad depending on that number. So thank you very much, and I think your role in keeping the stakeholders working together remains paramount. Simon, closing contribution from your end?
I won't repeat what Leslie and Tony have said, of course, which I don't think anybody can disagree with the points they raise. I would just make one other point of focus, perhaps, which is our tourism school, ITS. Over the years, we've had a lot of intake into our company from ITS. It's been a great part of our tourism industry. It's high time we sort of relook at it, improve it. We need to attract more Maltese people to our industry. I mean, of course, our country has grown, population has grown because the economy has grown. But tourism in particular, unlike perhaps other sectors, it's important that foreigners come to Malta actually meet Maltese people when they are being served at breakfast, when they're being checked into hotels. So one area of focus I would add to all the pieces that were mentioned, I would add an emphasis on making tourism a career prospect in Malta to the same degree other sectors are attracting our young people.
Tony, thanks, Simon. Tony, your last.
Rachel, if I may go off business, they say. When I heard Leslie saying the Maltese investors, it immediately struck a chord in my mind as to the economics of this industry. And I was very involved when the pandemic struck in March in informing government, look, this is a cash flow problem. We have had the cash coming into our companies disappear completely. We didn't miss 10% or 20%. We missed 100% because there were no tourists coming through the airport and there was no cash coming through our tills. So we needed help. And we all thought that this was going to be 3 months, at the worst 6 months, and we are all going to get back to where we were in 2019. In reality, it's now 18 months, and I fear that that cash flow problem is now starting to become a balance sheet problem. And this is an area where we are all going to have to put our heads together, because I can also already see pressures to have loans that were handed out by MDB, which have strict rules as to how long they are there for, and if they are extended, one has to go to the European Union and get agreement that these can be extended. It's not something that the central government can decide to do without anybody's intervention. This is something that is going to be a problem. So we have a number of problems coming our way, which are much more than putting people on planes and getting them into the hotels, because 23 is still a long way away, and we have to make sure that we reach the shore, that we keep swimming until we reach that shore. So we're already talking to people about this, but the industry must also realize that this is a problem, and this is not something that the government, the central government here in Malta, can just take unilateral decisions to help the industry. But at this moment in time, every decision the government takes has to be sanctioned by Brussels. Thank you, Rayful.
I'm sure Peter will be very proud of us. We had an hour allocated, and we're actually going to come in just sort of dead on time. I think I'd like to just make whilst thanking everybody for their extremely interesting, readily understandable interventions. I think what I'd like to stress, a theme which came out very clearly, is that the three panelists coming from three different dimensions had a high degree of commonality. The way their assessment of the problems and the challenges were similar. The view of what needs to be done both in the short term and in the longer term, again, were aligned. The importance that we need to use this, the current situation, as a means of sort of reassessing, taking stock, and creating a platform of recovery, which, as Leslie aptly put it, it's not about getting there overnight, but getting steady progress. What is very important is that the industry stakeholders are aligned. Like we've been through difficult periods in the past, I think it's always been pulling together in the same direction, which has helped the tourism sector industry survive. I think in many respects, the tourism industry, again, has been something which, generally speaking, has had consensus, from the broad base, both population and also on the political dimension. I think that it's very important that we, especially in these delicate periods, we try to keep away from controversy, remain focused on the issues, and remain focused on having the short-term recovery, in tandem or as overlapping with our longer-term recovery strategy. Again, I once again thank everybody for this afternoon and for their interventions. I'm sure that we can use these similar events as a means of continuing to rally the stakeholders on the same page, because I think it's very important that we do it. Thank you very much and good evening.